Hello and welcome to Skeletons in the Past podcast. I am your host Kayla, and in today's episode we are going to be covering the Sarah Winchester Mystery House. Now, I am fascinated with this specific story. I was very fortunate and very lucky. A lot of the cases I will cover on this channel, I probably will never get to go to them. Just the fact there's so many places that are haunted in the world. However, that being said, I have been to the Sarah Winchester Mystery House, and many of you probably don't even know what this is, but I actually have a very personal approach to this because when I was very young, I was watching the Travel Channel and they were doing a special on the Sarah Winchester Mystery House, and the Ghost Adventures team has been there, and so all of my favorite people have been there. And in 2018, I actually got to go visit the house itself and take a tour. So a lot of the information that you're going to see in today's video, a lot of it I got on my tour, as well as a lot of historical information that I'm pulling from online. So anyway, without further ado, let's go. All right, guys. So there's a little corgi on my thumb, or on my banner on YouTube. This is actually my corgi in real life. This is my Pembroke Welsh corgi, and his name is Sir Multi. Hey, good boys. Who's a good boy? Everybody loves Morty. He's known as the Little Loafy. Anyway, so if you ever see him in any of my videos, that's legit. If you have a moment, please go check out Bones Coffee Company. If you don't know who they are, they're this amazing coffee company that has all these, I kind of consider them like a gourmet-ish coffee company because they have like strawberry cheesecake, they have cookies and cream, but then they have like your regular French vanilla and caramel, and they have pretty much a coffee for everyone. So if you would and you want to check them out, just click in my description box below and follow the link and they'll know that I sent you. Okay, so let's talk about the Sarah Winchester Mystery House. So if you don't know, the Sarah Winchester Mystery House is like this giant mansion, but it never actually started that way. When I was there in 2018, it was probably like the biggest thing I got to check off my bucket list. I was so excited, and while we were there, we drove up to San Francisco and I got to see where they filmed the beginning scene of Fuller House and Full House, you know, so I also got to cross that off my bucket list, which is pretty cool. Okay, so let's get into the Sarah Winchester Mystery House. So the story of the Winchester House began in September of 1839 with the birth of a baby girl to Leonard and Sarah Pardee of New Haven, Connecticut. The baby's name was also Sarah, and as she reached maturity, she became the belle of the city. She was well received at social events, and thanks to all her musical skills, her fluency in various foreign languages, and her sparkling charm, her beauty was also well known by the young men about the town. So although she was petite and stood only 4 feet 10 inches, she made up for this in personality and loveliness, which I guess you have to technically if you think about it, because if you're short, it's like, I don't know, some of those girls are feisty. Anyway, so at the same time though Sarah was growing up, a young man was also maturing in another prominent New Haven family. The young man's name was William Wirt Winchester, and he was the son of Oliver Winchester, a shirt manufacturer, a businessman, and in 1857 he took over the assets of the firm, which made the volcanic repeater, a rifle that was used, a lever mechanism to load bullets into the breech. So basically the father took over this company, but they met because, which is not mentioned here, they actually met because they were going to the same church, and so their families were very well acquainted with each other, you know, over time. Guys, I just noticed my dog scratched me because I was like, what was burning? And then I realized I picked him up and he just clawed me. Anyway, so basically they were making this specific type of gun. It was obviously very well known for its time, but it obviously could have been better, you know? So anyway, but the gun was like a vast improvement over muzzle loading rifles, so of the recent times. So I guess they were still using the bayonets and stuff like that, where you had to like manually put everything in, from what I'm understanding. And so these guys created it to where it was like there's actually a barrel with like multiple rounds that you could put into the gun and shoot at the same time. Because it was easy to reload and could fire rapidly, the Henry said to average 1 shot every 3 seconds, and it became the first true repeating rifle and a favorite among the Northern troops out at the outbreak of the Civil War. Money began to pour in, and Oliver Winchester soon amassed a large fortune from the government contracts and private sales. So they were bringing in bank. So here's another family. Like last week we talked about the Lemp Mansion, and the Lemp family was bringing in tons of money because of beer. At the same time, around the same time, these guys are now coming out with the Winchester Rifles. So this is a big deal. He reorganized the company and changed the name to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. The family prospered, and on September 30th, 1862, at the height of the Civil War, William Wirt Winchester and Sarah Parody were married in an elaborate ceremony in New Haven. During this time frame, William was also going to college. Even though they got married and stuff like that, he was going to college because he was eventually going to have to take over the family business. And so he was actually going to Yale in Connecticut, and he was studying and stuff like that, and he was doing very well in school, but then he was able to eventually take over the family business. So about 4 years later, after the ceremony, they ended up having their first child and what would be their only child. And so on July 15th, 1866, Sarah gave birth to a daughter named Annie Parody Winchester. Just a short time later, the first disaster struck for Sarah as her daughter contracted an illness known as marasmus. This is basically a children's disease that I feel like can be preventable now just due to modern medicine. But basically the marasmus is like a childhood disease where they don't metabolize, nutrients, which is obviously very important in babies. That's how they get fat and healthy and chunky and super cute. Side note, my youngest was 9 pounds 3 ounces. I have 2 small children, and so he's a chunk now, especially the youngest. That being said, her child did die of starvation though. And so because you can't metabolize the nutrients that she was taking in, and obviously this is before formula, this is before all that stuff. So so basically her body just wasted away to nothing, and then the infant died on July 24th. Sarah was so shattered by this event that she withdrew into herself and teetered on the edge of madness for some time. So she had pretty much, I believe, what was postpartum depression, and I'm going to touch on this a lot because I think it truly played into why things were happening the way they were and how she was handling the whole situation. Postpartum depression, if you don't know, is a very tricky situation. I have had postpartum depression with both of my children. It's basically your body after you have a baby, okay? So when you have a baby, you're pregnant, you're super hormonal. So what happens is after you have that baby, all of a sudden your body's freaking out because it just gave birth. Not going to go into all the gory details. I'm just saying, you give birth, your body's freaking out, you're hormonal, you're crying a lot, and a lot of times with postpartum depression, people handle things differently. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I'm just saying I've had postpartum depression, so I can tell you it's a really serious thing. However, mental health was not necessarily a really studied thing like that back in the day. If you had any kind of thing that was questionable, it was turned into, oh, well, you're just psychotic. But there wasn't this definitive situation. So because she gave birth to this baby and then basically it died 2 weeks later, it's a very traumatic thing. And obviously no one's going to see therapists at this time because therapy is not a thing. Or it probably is, but either way it wasn't managed. And so you have this whole situation with her hormones going all crazy. So with the loss of her child, it just makes me wonder ultimately if, because she had postpartum depression, possibly, did this contribute to her actually seeing the spirits, or did she actually have these spirits haunting her, which we're going to get into later. But it's just something interesting to take into account because I don't think people realize like that mental illness was playing such a factor back then. So we'll see. Anyway, so as a result of this disease, this marasmus disease for her child, she unfortunately died on July 24th. But Sarah was so shattered by this event that she withdrew her into herself and teetered on the edge of madness for some time. So basically a psychological thing. And in the end, it would be nearly a decade before she returned to her normal self, but she and William would never have another child. So yeah, Sarah was the, so she only had Annie and that was it. They did say that she did take some of her hair, and it was found in the safe after Sarah did pass away, and so it was one of the only things that they had found of Annie's. So not long after Sarah had returned to her family and home, another tragedy struck. So William, now the heir to the entire Winchester Empire, was struck down with pulmonary tuberculosis, so TB, right? They check you for that at the, I was a corpsman in the Navy. So what they do is tuberculosis is a pulmonary disease, and usually when people think of TB, a lot of the cowboys, you'll see them coughing up blood in their little handkerchief or whatever, and TB is very contagious. Like, it's one of those things you don't mess around with. And so they usually do a little test where they'll prick a little thing under the skin, and then if it's still there, if there's a little bump still there, that means you have TB, and so they treat you. So that was one of the things we always did in the military. Anyway, so he was struck down with tuberculosis, pulmonary tuberculosis, and he died March 7th, 1881. As a result of his death, Sarah inherited over $20 million, which is basically a lot of money. I'm wondering how much this is in like real time. Hold on. I'm not gonna believe this. So I just converted how much money she inherited. This is a boatload of money, okay? So in 1866, $20 million is actually worth, in today's money, $326,940,880.50. That is a boatload of money, guys. I can't even imagine getting $326 million. She was one of the most wealthiest people in the United States. So basically, she got all this money after her husband died. And then she kind of just like didn't know what to do with it. She also received 48.9% of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company like stocks and stuff. And then she also got $1,000 allowance per day, which is like a lot of money in itself. So not only did she get all this money, right, but then she's getting an allowance every day. So I'm kind of like, I wouldn't know what to do with that. That just seems like a lot. I probably would travel, but she's just so sad. I mean, think about it. Like, it took her a long time to get back to just being kind of normal, right? And then you have your husband that you're grieving the loss of him. So it's like, I have all this money, and it goes to show money cannot buy you happiness at all. It can provide you security, but it does not bring back people that you love. And so that's what she was going through. And so she really just felt like nothing would ease her pain. I personally have lost both of my grandparents. I don't consider myself close with my family. I have a very weird backstory, which I don't want to get into, but I am not close with any of my family. In fact, I am not in communication with any of my family as of today. My grandparents, though, when I was in foster care, were my role models, my rocks, and I miss them a lot. And I took both of their deaths equally as hard, but I think I took my grandpa's death the hardest because we weren't expecting it. You know, you don't really expect it to happen. I mean, I knew he was old, but the point is that you go through this grieving process, and it takes a long time. And honestly, it wasn't until this year. They died back in 2017. It's now 2020. And this is the first year where it feels like it's not hurting as bad. It still hurts that they're not there, and there's some times that I've missed them. But the grieving process is kind of effectively changing to an extent, if that makes sense. So for her, you know, having just grieved the loss and finally gotten to kind of a normal state of, you know, herself, now her husband's dead, and now she has to restart this whole grieving process all over again. And obviously that's going to trigger and I think bring up a lot of emotions that she wasn't prepared to deal with, especially if she would have had the counseling, I think, with like a therapist or something to help her talk through everything. I think that's extremely difficult to be going through what she was doing. So anyway, she grieved deeply, not only for her husband but also for her lost child. A short time later, a friend suggested that Sarah might speak to a spiritualist medium about her loss. So medium is like a psychic, but a person who basically talks to dead people. Your husband is here, the medium told her when she went on to provide a description of William Winchester. He says for me to tell you that there is a curse on your family, which took the life of he and your child. It will soon take you too. It is a curse that has resulted from the terrible weapon created by the Winchester family. Thousands of persons have died because of it, and their spirits are now seeking vengeance. Sarah was then told that she must sell her property in New Haven and head towards the setting sun, so California. She would be guided by her husband, and then when she found her new home in the West, she would recognize it. You must start a new life, said the medium, and then build your home for yourself and for the spirits who have fallen from this terrible weapon too. You can never stop building the house, and if you continue to building, you will live. Stop and you will die. Really, after the seance, obviously Sarah is like creeped the hell out. She's like, oh my God, you know, these spirits did this to my family. Like, no wonder all these bad things are happening to me, and I don't want to die. So I think this would genuinely freak anybody out, especially given the times. So she basically immediately sold her home, and then she she sold her home in New Haven, and with a vast fortune at her disposal, she moved west to California. But what they don't say in here is that she also decided to, before she just immediately packed up and left, she also took a 3-year hiatus, and she went to Europe. And I think it was also, she needed a vacation. She needed to properly grieve the loss of these people that she loved, and I felt like she probably couldn't do that because of where she was at. So it doesn't say where though that she went to Europe. A lot of sources say that you know, she was in France, and the reason why is because she ended up becoming a part of the Freemason Society. Now this is a really big deal because in the Freemasons, obviously it's a guys organization. However, in France, the Freemasons at the time that she arrived became one of the first co-ed Freemasons, where they were having females and males. And with her status, I mean, think about it. She's selling she's basically supplying guns to the world. This woman is very powerful for being very short. She is very wealthy, and so she had the ability to provide weapons to the world. So obviously, because of her stature and who she was, it made the Freemasons look really good, and then obviously they got a hold of her money. Shortly after the seance, you know, after she goes to Europe and does her thing, she sold her home in New Haven, and with a vast disposal of a fortune, she moved west to California, which is now where San Jose is. She believed that she was being guided by the hand of her dead husband, and she did not stop traveling until she reached the Santa Clara Valley in 1884. Here she found a 6-room home under construction which belonged to Dr. Caldwell. She entered into negotiations with him and soon convinced him to sell her the house and the 162 acres in which it rested upon. She tossed away any negotiations with him and soon convinced him to sell her the house and the 162 acres. She tossed away any previous plans for the house and started building whatever she chose to. So she's got like all this money, and she's getting a $1,000 allowance. So of course she's able to just do this. But she handpicked her local workers and craftsmen, and for the next 36 years, they built and rebuilt, altered and changed and constructed and demolished one section of the house after another. She kept 22 carpenters at work year-round, 24 hours a day, and the sounds of hammers sounded throughout the day and night. Can you imagine like being this woman's neighbor? Like, think about it. Like, I hate hearing construction all the time. Imagine just having construction though going 24/7. You would go insane. So I wouldn't have been a very good neighbor with her. But yeah, so she just basically hired a bunch of people. But when we were on the tour, like the one thing that they talked about is how well she treated them. She paid them, they lived on the property, they got holidays off, like they were very well taken care of. And you know, with the times, the Great Depression, obviously, things like that, that were coming around, the economy, having a very stable job like that was so important. So anyways, as the house grew into 26 rooms, rail cars were stitched onto the nearby line to bring building materials and imported furnishings into the house. The house was rapidly growing and expanding, and while Sarah claimed to have no master plan for the structure, she met each morning with her foreman, and they would go over the hand sketch plans for the day that she would draw for them for the day's work. And so the plans were often chaotic but showed real flair for building. Sometimes though they would not work out the right way, but Sarah always had a quick solution. If this happened, they would just build another room around the existing one. As the days and weeks and months passed, the house continued to grow. Rooms were added to rooms and then turned into the entire wings. Doors were joined to windows, levels turned into towers and peaks, and place eventually grew into the height of 7 stories inside the house. This place is huge, and honestly, like, the tour didn't do it justice. Like, we went on a smaller tour of the house. We didn't see everything. The house has over 100, it's got 161 bedrooms in it. It's truly a mass too, right? So it was 161 bedrooms, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors. This is crazy. 47 fireplaces, 13 bedrooms, and 9 kitchens are currently in the house there today. But at this time, we're at 47 fireplaces. There's also a lot of random staircases that like lead to nowhere, and doors that open to like the outside with no porch. It's very dangerous. You can really honestly get lost in the house if you're not careful, because everything kind of looks the same and it's weird. So there was countless staircases that led to nowhere, a blind chimney that stopped short of the ceiling, closets that opened to blank walls, which is totally true, trapped doors, double back hallways, skylights that were located one above the other, doors that opened to steep drops into the lawn below, and dozens of other oddities. Even all of the stair posts were installed upside down, and many of the bathrooms had glass doors on them. It was obvious that Sarah was intrigued by the number 13. That is a big deal. She loved the number 13 for whatever reason, and she loved spider webs and spiders. So a lot of the windows you'll see, I'll insert photos throughout this, but there's a lot of, it's usually like if there's windows with crystals, it would be like 13 crystals, or there's 13 sections within the spider web. Like, it was very intricate. She was very clever, and she came up with all of these designs herself. Like, it was not like, oh hey, somebody else did it for me. Like, Sarah had a hand in choosing how everything was done. But she loved stained glass, and I'm a sucker for stained glass windows. And a lot of these were very expensive and came imported from other countries. So while all this may seem crazy to us, this was her way that she can control the spirits who came into her house for evil purposes, or who were outlaws or vengeful people in their past life. These men, bad men, killed by the Winchester Rifles, could wreak havoc on Sarah's life. The house had been designed into a maze to confuse and discourage the bad spirits. The house continued to grow, and by 1906, it had reached a towering 7 stories tall. Sarah had continued her occupancy and expansion of the house, living in a melancholy solitude, with no one other than her servants, the workmen, and of course the spirits. It was said that on sleepless nights, when she was not communicating with the spirit world about designs for the house, Sarah would play her grand piano into the early hours of the morning. According to the legend, the piano would be admired by passerbyers on the street outside, despite the fact that only 2 keys were badly out of tune. The most tragic event occurred within the house when the Great San Francisco earthquake of 1906 struck. When it was all over, portions of the Winchester mansion were nearly in ruins. The top 3 floors of the house had collapsed into the gardens and would never be rebuilt. In addition, the fireplaces that were located in the Daisy room, where Miss Winchester was sleeping on the night of the earthquake, collapsed, shifting the room and trapping Sarah inside. So what's crazy is it took her her servants 2 to 3 hours to dig her out. And to be honest with you, the Daisy room was my favorite. I love daisies. Those are my favorite flowers. Gerber daisies and regular daisies. That being said, it took them almost 2 to 3 hours to dig her out, and she's only 4'10". She's not a really big woman. So the fact that it took them such a long time to get her out, she just took this as a sign that even though she survived, that basically the spirits were saying, don't rebuild these towers, don't rebuild this stuff, we don't like it. That's what she attributed the earthquake to, was the spirits were causing it. So for the next several months, the workmen toiled to repair the damage done by the earthquake. Although actually the mammoth structure had far better than most of the buildings in the area, only a few rooms had been badly harmed. Although it had lost the highest floors and several cupolas, the towers had toppled over. The expansion on the house began once more. The number of bedrooms increased from 15 to 20 and then 25. Chimneys were installed all over the place, although strangely they served no purpose. Some believe that perhaps they were added because the old stories say that ghosts like to appear and disappear through them. On a related note, it had been documented that only 2 mirrors were installed in the house. Sarah believed that the ghosts were afraid of their own reflection. Unfortunately, on September 4th, 1922, after a conference session with the spirits in the seance room, Sarah went to her bedroom for the night at some point, and in the early morning hours, she died in her sleep at the age of 83. She left all of her possessions to her niece, Frances Marriott, who had been handling most of Sarah's business affairs for quite some time. Little did anyone know, but by this time, Sarah's large bank account had dwindled considerably, which, I mean, duh, like she's building this house, paying all these people, and so I don't think the money really mattered to her anymore at that point. You know, she was just trying to do what it was to, you know, keep her and her family, like, you know, just herself in general, like just sane through everything that happened. So rumor also had it that somewhere in the house was a hidden safe containing a fortune in jewelry, a solid gold dinner service, which Sarah had entertained her ghostly guests. Her relatives forced open a number of safes, but only found old fish lines, socks, newspaper clippings about her daughter's and husband's deaths, a lock of baby hair, and a suit of woolen underwear. No solid gold dinner service was ever found or discovered. The furnishings, personal belongings, and a surplus of construction and decorative materials were removed from the house, and the structure itself was sold to a group of investors who planned to use it as a tourist attraction. One of the first to see the place when it opened to the public was Robert L. Ripley, who featured the house in his popular column, Ripley's Believe It or Not. The house was initially advertised as being 148 rooms, but so confusing was the floor plan that every time a room counted was taken, a different total came up. The place was so puzzling that it was said that the workmen took more than 6 weeks just to get the furniture out of it, which is like a lot. The moving men came so lost because, and I mean, before I even go any further, so when I was at the house, it was crazy cool because she had different themes for each of the rooms. It was very well out. A lot of them were inspired from like Chinese design. She had a lot of like wallpapers imported from other countries, and she even had one of the first standing showers, heated standing showers, in the West, which was very interesting, especially for her. So she was very up on the times. She also had a phone system where it was like a pipes that you could talk into the pipe and you could hear it wherever she was in the house, which is pretty cool. So if she actually needed something, she could just talk into this little pipe and they could hear her down multiple floors or in different places throughout the house to get her things. So I can only imagine when they're going in and just trying to remove all the furniture. It was probably really intense, but it was so puzzling, and they said it was like a labyrinth, they told the magazine American Weekly. In 1928, it was a house where the downstairs neither to the cellar nor the upstairs to the roof. The rooms of the house were counted over and over again, and 5 years later, it was estimated that 160 rooms existed, although no one is really sure if that is even correct. Today, the house has been declared a California historical landmark and is registered to the National Park as a service, as a large, odd dwelling with an unknown number of rooms. So some sites say 500 rooms, some say 160 because there's truly an unknown amount of rooms. I feel like what they should have done was like take post-it notes and then count and like number them and count around the house. And then once if they've been to that room already, then put a post-it note on it, you know? So that's the way I probably would have done it, but let me know what you guys think. The most would say that such a place is still a harbor at least few of the ghosts who have came to reside there at the invitation of Sarah Winchester. The question is though, do they really haunt the place? Some would say that perhaps no ghosts ever walked there at all. that the Winchester mansion is nothing more than a product of an eccentric woman's mind, too much wealth being allowed in the wrong hands. There is no question that we can regard the place as one of the world's largest haunted houses, because that's totally true, based on nothing more than the legend of the place alone. Is this the case where we need to draw the line between what is real haunted spot and what is really a great story? Is the Winchester mansion really haunted? You will have to decide for yourself. Although some people have already made up their minds, there's been a number of strange events reported at the Winchester house for many years, and they continue to be reported today. Dozens of psychics have visited the house over the years, and most have come away convinced or claim to be convinced that the spirits still wander the place. In addition to the ghost of Sarah Winchester, there have also been many other sightings throughout the years. In the years that the house has been open to the public, employees and visitors alike have seen unusual encounters here. There have been footsteps, banging doors, mysterious voices, windows that bang so hard that they shatter, cold spots, strange moving lights, doorknobs that turn by themselves, and don't forget the scores of psychics who have their own claims of phenomena to report. Obviously, these are all standard reports of a haunted house, but are the stories merely wishful thinking? Reports of ghosts and spirits to continue to the tradition of Sarah Winchester's bizarre legacy, or could these stories be true? Was the house really built as a monument to the dead, or do the phantoms still lurk in the maze-like corridors of the Winchester Mystery House? So that is the Sarah Winchester Mystery House. It's truly a magnificent structure on its own. Like, there's just so much to it. If you ever get the chance to go to San Jose, I highly recommend it. It's so crazy because they've kept like all the outside like pristine condition. It looks the same. If you can, like I said, I recommend going and touring it and actually checking everything out. And you know, obviously you can see in the front when you go in, you can see the Winchester rifles, like all of them that they ever made, which is really neat. Like in the gift shop area, they have so much to do. So if you're ever in California and you want to go check out this mansion, totally do it. Definitely worth my opinion. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in next week's episode. Bye!